Right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. It's Monday, Conversations in Agave. Today, we're very excited to have Josh Veryser with us from El Rey Zapoteco. He is coming to us live from the hot climes of Mexico. Josh has been living down there since 2012. His background is in the travel industry side. He's kind of worked across all levels of the travel industry, hotels, airlines, cruises, and at some point he just decided that if he was going to live in Mexico, then he should probably do something that related to Mexico. And as is the case with so many people, Mezcal found him, and he fell in love with El Rey Zapoteco, a brand that has existed as a brand since 1960. And it's great to see it coming into the market. So Josh, welcome. And for those of you out there, I will kind of be monitoring the Q&A. So if there are questions that you have as Josh gets going through his presentation, if it's something that is directly related to what we're talking about, go ahead and ask a question. Otherwise, we will have time at the end for full-blown Q&A. All right, Josh, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Hey, everyone. If you cannot hear me well, just send Susan some comments in the comment section. Just want to make sure that is not something that affects this. Okay, so Susan introduced me. I have been I've been living in Mexico since 2012. You might ask why, and the reason is I met a señorita in Las Vegas, of all places. So the whole thing about what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, that didn't exactly happen for me. Ended up in what happens in Vegas ends up in Mexico City. Yeah, so I got married in late 2012 and moved a month prior just to get ready for the wedding and everything. So I've been down and we were in Mexico City for 5 years. Right, if you've ever been to Mexico City, we live very central, like right about a block from the U.S. Embassy, right at the Ángel de Independencia, which, random fact for all of you, that was also a statue that was gifted to Mexico by France, just like France gave us the Statue of Liberty. Interesting fact. At any rate, we have been in Cuernavaca for the past 2 years, with 2 little daughters. So, and Cuernavaca is an hour south of Mexico City. So, with that, I got introduced to El Rey Zapoteco by just very randomly. I'm friends with in Denver. There's a Mexican restaurant chain, not a chain, but there's 3 locations. Pretty popular little joint called Machete. There, they've got I think they're probably the most famous locations right downtown Denver, across the street from the Union Station, the train station. So I'm friends with the owners. One of the owners was reached out to me because he wanted to do a trip to Oaxaca, and doesn't speak Spanish, and just so he reached out to me since he knew I was in Mexico City. So we planned a trip to Oaxaca. He originally had wanted to, I think he was interested in having like a private label brand. Now, fast forward, he found out that because of 3-tier system, he can't really do that since he's, also owns the restaurant. But that was kind of the genesis or the reason for that trip. So we went down to Oaxaca. We did what, a lot of people do. We scheduled tastings at different visits at different palenques. And one of those was El Rey Zapoteco. El Rey Zapoteco is about a 40-minute drive from Oaxaca City, and what is called Santiago Matatlan is the name of the town. It is the self-proclaimed mezcal capital of the world. Take it, consider the source. But there are a lot of popular brands that are a lot of mezcal is made in Santiago Matatlan. In fact, I think their neighbors. Their neighbors are Los Danzantes, which makes I think in the U.S. it's Noales. But so yeah, if you're when you go to Santiago Matapan, it's a little town, so you cannot miss El Rey Zapoteco. We did a visit with them. We did the whole experience. We cooked, helped them set the oven, cook the agaves, the whole. Like a lot of people have done in Oaxaca. Spend a whole day out there, and in the day you drank mezcal and it was fun and yada yada yada. Great. So we kept in touch. That was like probably I'd say at least 2 years ago. And at that point in time, I was, I've always wanted to. One of my goals, professionally and personally, is to achieve "quote unquote" financial independence. Right? Not have to. You never know what can happen with your with your job, right? When you're relying upon other people. So, for my family, I wanted to find something. So at that time, I was doing a completely different project. It was with some college buddies making some custom blazers. That project and it had like custom prints inside. It was really quirky, it's cool, it was fun. But the thing about custom blazers is it's even more of a niche market than mezcal. They were kind of hard to sell. So that didn't work out, and I obviously met these guys at El Rey Zapoteco, and I knew that they were at that time they were exporting through, I think it was a pair of brothers that were in California. They weren't importing, but frankly they didn't really know the path to success. So they were in California, but in a limited way, and there's just a lot of things that needed to happen, things that needed attention that didn't get attention. So we kept in touch. We agreed that I would start finally in Colorado. So that process took me from the time that we met to actually going to market. And again, this is me. So someone that's way smarter or better at business or whatever could probably do it tomorrow if they knew everything how to do it. But it took me 2 years. And what that involved was we did a complete redesign of the logo. I felt strongly that the logo, the old logo that if you've ever been to Oaxaca and gone to the Market 20 de Noviembre, November 20th market, you'll see it the little stands where they sell mezcal. El Rey Zapoteco is like in almost all of those stands. It's been around. And if they're still in business 60 years later, they're probably doing something right. So what I was going to say is I felt that the logo though was not something like it needed some TLC. So we went through the process of redesigning, and this is one of these things where I made a choice. I think I could have probably created my own brand and just had El Rey Zapoteco produce it, and just have them be the mezcaleros behind it, and just me be have my own brand. But and there are definitely pros to doing that. I mean, you have more autonomy of what you're doing. You don't have to compromise as much. So what I mean by that is, with an eye towards, I'm talking about the logo. El Rey Zapoteco was owned by the family. The family they own their own agave fields. We'll get into this a little bit more. They actually have 2 businesses. It's kind of interesting, which also muddies the waters a little bit. But I had a vision for the logo, which is probably way progressive, and they're coming from a place of a logo that hadn't been redesigned in many years. So we ended up kind of meeting in the middle, and it's good. It's good. I think it's better than where we were starting. So that's an example. Now I had to, for anyone out there that if you're thinking about starting your own mezcal brand or bringing on a producer or an existing brand and bringing them online like I did, there's a lot. My recommendation would be let people who are good at what they do, let them do it. You don't have to take on the entire world. So, for example, I had found a brand, El Rey Zapoteco. Then I had to find someone who handles all the logistics. So I have a U.S. Customs broker who handles also, who arranges all the transportation and logistics moving the product from Santiago Mazatlán to the U.S. border, and then getting the merchandise free and transported to the warehouse. And then to that end, I have warehouses who specialize in whether it's wine or whatever. But I have two warehouses right now. One is in Colorado, and the other one's in Benicia, just north of Susan in San Fran. It was a long process of finding who to work with, so that it would all come together. And then on the distribution end, I found out about a company called LibDib, Liberation Distribution, and this is an interesting one because they're very much like they're trying to take technology and apply that to a very old system or scheme, which is what they call the three-tier distribution, a three-tier system, sorry. But they have an online platform, so they're technically the legal wholesaler of record. But you or me as an importer, for example, since I'm legally an importer, I can sell the product to LibDib can then sell it to any retailer or restaurant. But the thing is, they take lower margins than a traditional distributor. But the catch-22 is they don't have boots on the ground. So you need to find a solution. Like how are you going to achieve sales and sell through in a market?
But I mean, I don't want to interrupt, but I mean, I think the reality is for anybody in the mezcal category, even if you have a distributor with sales staff, it's not as if that sales staff is going to be dedicated to selling, your brand into the market. I think the challenge is, with most distributors, they make their money through products that have higher margin and sell through faster. So the vodkas of the world, and mezcal is less of a margin for them. It's not as much of a profit maker. And so even in the best case where you have like the distributor with those boots on the ground and everything, you are still going to have to do a lot of the work yourself. And that's, that is a big challenge. So sorry, didn't want to interrupt you there on that, but it needs to be stated. Yeah.
It's a great point. These are the things that maybe that aren't often talked about, but I put a lot of thought into, like, I come from a different world. Like Susan mentioned, I come from travel, but I also come from the startup world too. So I understand like what is required to get quote unquote traction. And so to that end, it is very much about distribution, but distribution in the sense of, not in the sense of the liquor world, but in the sense of sale. Sales is very, very important. And as Susan said, you can't rely on, at the end of the day, it's logical. A big distributor, if they're carrying, say, one of their big sellers is Jack Daniels, how can they justify taking salespeople, time, money, energy, all that off of a cash cow like Jack Daniels, and putting it on a little mezcal brand? Like it's a risk for them, right? And it's a risky risk. It's not like a calculated risk necessarily, unless they have a lot of sales going on. So to that point, yeah, you're gonna have to figure out how you're gonna sell your product. And so what we've done, we have taken a blended approach. We use LibDib. For LibDib, we are in California. Just last week, we are now open and can sell in New York and Florida. So for LibDib, we also I started in Colorado importing in really October, right after the event at Mexico in a Bottle in Denver. So that's basically when I started. So I had a pretty good, like, even though it was very little time, but pretty good track record of sales. I leaned into the fact that I'm from Denver, contacts there, so I was able to, kind of hack that life hack a little bit quicker than I'm going to be able to do probably with California. And we're going to talk about California because we probably have some of our team on today. Hello, guys. But yeah, so for LibDib for California, we have John Schwartz is going to handle our sales in San Francisco Bay Area. And then Yvonne and Daisy are actually cousins of the Mescalero, interestingly enough, and they live in Los Angeles, so they're going to help out there. So we're setting things up to try and address the fact you do need kind of some kind of boots on the ground. You could probably get away with it for a certain amount of time. But it's hard. Business is about relationships too, and you can never replace, like, we're doing everything on Zoom right now, but like you can never replace like that FaceTime.
Yep. Well, and I imagine too, you had been planning for this for a while. You had, it was like, okay, here's how we're going to execute it. This is what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden, our world changes and you have to have the flexibility of changing all of your plans. And it was like, okay, so now what are we going to do? Usually on-premise would have been our focus. Now it's like we have to focus on off-premise. In the markets that you're in, thankfully, the ABC rules got relaxed. So there are some on-premise locations that are able to sell to-go cocktails or tasters or things like that. Not a lot, but at least, there's something. So pandemic hits, you're launching a brand. What do you do?
Yeah. I'm an eternal optimist. I try and look at challenges as opportunities. So I do come from the mindset that I think of other brands who maybe have made their business model is very much dependent upon on-premise sales. I'm almost like cannonballing into the pool with zero sales I started with, right? So I have to kind of like adjust on the go, but in real time. But in some ways that's like less for me. That's almost, it's easier for me to change that mid course than another brand who's maybe like 80% on premise, right? It's a serious monkey wrench to throw into your business. How do you address that? So in some ways for me that is less of an issue now. To answer your question directly, we need to figure out, like, I'm in the process right now of figuring out off premise how can we attack that. And we have some we have some things we're working on. We're working on sales sheets that almost do the work of selling the products for the sales rep. Like sales rep can hand this, but how can you convey as much important information in a succinct way as possible without physically being there. There are places who will take on, believe it or not, they will and are taking on new brands in this environment. Liquor. It's just a question of like how, with all the noise, and if you're thinking about having your own brand, like how do you? At the end, it's very similar also on premise. Like there's only so much shelf space at bars, right?
Right.
And I want to say, Susan, on the Mexico side, it's called INPI, which is the trademark office in Mexico. I want to say that there are over 1,000 brands currently registered for mezcal.
Yeah.
U.S. I don't know how many, but I want to say it's like in the order of 200. I honestly don't know.
I think we're at maybe 300. Maybe 400 brands. I mean, it's hard to tell because there's some that come in and they go out. It's that is the nature of it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, at least in your case, you're launching a brand that is a recognized name, and particularly in California and Southern California, where there is such an enormous Oaxacan population. It's like you have at least a community of people that are probably like, oh my gosh, this great brand, has now come into the market. And especially given travel restrictions and all of that right now, it's like, the ability to get that taste of home. And it's how you reach those folks. But I'm always interested in people who take the route that you did, which was rather than doing my own brand. And as you said, like not just working with a producer, but as to fill the bottles, to contract with them. brand. The whole happen is there's just there's a lot of support and benefit to the existing brand in Mexico when that happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Quick note on that. So, I've always been a big fan of history and tradition. And so when I found out that this brand had been around, and really, to my knowledge, I'm going to keep looking because you just don't know, but to my knowledge, to date, El Rey Zapoteco is the oldest artisanal mezcal brand from Oaxaca that still produces its own mezcal. There is a brand called El Cortico. I don't know if you've heard of it. I think they started maybe 1957 or 50, something around there. But they no longer, they outsource production. So they're still, yeah. So when I found this out about El Rey Zapoteco, I was like, and they're not in the U.S. and no, like, what's going on? Why not? So when I saw that opportunity, I was very much like all over it, all over it. I couldn't believe it, and it was almost like, you know, it just fell on my lap.
Yeah.
I gotta help them. I gotta bring to bear everything I know from business, and let's get them traction in the U.S. market before because quite frankly, mezcal is a hot topic, and so a lot of brands are coming to market. There's a lot of competition, and it would be from my perspective, it would be a shame that a diamond in the rough like El Rey Zapoteco doesn't have a seat at the table in the U.S. market, which is the most important market really for mezcal. So yeah, that's that. In addition to, that's kind of like the selfish perspective. The other thing, I'll just make a quick note on it. You know, I live in Mexico. My wife is Mexican. My kids are Mexican. My two girls are Mexican American. You know, it's important to me that El Rey Zapoteco maintained its autonomy. Like the family, which are their Zapotecs, I want them to remain the authors of their future. So I want to find success for the brand, for the family, so that they're not put in a position where they would have to sell, or like basically become employees later on. The mezcaleros are just producing it, but no, it stays their business. They make the decisions. And to that point, Susan, it was interesting. We on my note about, or my comment about, you know, compromise. On our latest round, we were going through pricing, renegotiating pricing, and it turns out El Rey Zapoteco really has two businesses, because most mezcaleros will obtain or get their agaves, their magueyes, from farmers who own the farms. El Rey Zapoteco is they're uniquely positioned. They have large fields, and they are their fields, so they actually have a lot of capacity. But you know, they're from a brand perspective, they're operating under capacity, well under capacity. So what do you do with all those magueyes? You sell them to other mezcaleros, other brands, and so they have a whole another business that is selling agaves and magueyes. And so, you know, it's something I need to be cognizant of, and also like respectful of. That what are we trying to do here? Make sure that we're all on the same page. The family we have their buy-in as to what we're doing in the U.S. market, et cetera, because it's important. You know, it's important. It's there. I'm not a mezcalero. I don't know. There are probably people on this panel right now panelists who probably, attendees, I should say, that probably know a whole lot more about agaves than I do. But I can speak to like business and all that. Like, yeah. So I think with that, if you don't have any questions at this point, Susan, I'm gonna share my screen and show some photos of the palenque, of the agave fields, and then maybe that'll give time for folks to, if they want to ask me questions.
Well, I know one question that came up was whether or not you have pictures of the old logo.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay. The old logo, and then obviously we'll see the new logo too.
Yeah,
That
I
came
think
up.
we've even got in the pictures. There's the old logo. So yeah, let's jump. Let's jump.
Okay, perfect.
Bear with me.
Always fun that moment of switching over to the share screen. Um,
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
mm-hmm. Yes.
Present. Full screen. Present. Okay. So this is the new version of the logo. Okay, obviously you can see that. I believe this person. I'm not 100% positive. But I believe this is the founder, and I'll show you the second screen. Is the picture of him. Yeah, when he was younger. His name was Don Serafin. So this was you can kind of see the logo at the bottom left, and I'm looking at a clear picture. This was the founder, Serafin, Don Serafin. So way back when.
Hey, Mom.
This is the family.
Mom.
So
Sorry.
Doña Juana is the family matriarch, and she's very well known. She's very well known in the mezcal world amongst mezcaleros. I mean, she's been around a long time, and people who are mezcaleros know her. So Doña Juana, and these are the three sons, and then they in turn have their own sons, and we'll show a picture. But so here, as you drive into the town, imagine you're coming from the right side of the picture because that's where you'd be coming in. It's the Palenque is on the right side of the street. You cannot miss it. It's smack dab in the middle of Little Santiago Matatlan, and it's pretty big, so it's impossible to miss. So you can see there's a better picture of the old logo. And by the way, if you see this bagasso, I think is what they call it, right? And you'll have to forgive me if you hear an ice cream truck in Mexico. There's a lot of sounds in the street that will come, like just random things will come by. So, pardon me. So there's that bagasso. I think they use that. I'm like 99% sure they use that as fertilizer. So the agave fibers that are after the juice has been fermented, like what's left of that is the bagasso, and I think they reutilize that as fertilizer. Okay, so yeah, I just like this picture because it very much conveys what mezcalero families are like. It's passing on a tradition, and these kids are going to be taking the reins one day for El Rey Zapoteco. Here's you can see it's horse driven. It's pretty, as far as a palenque goes, it's a pretty big palenque. You can see, if you can see, I don't know if you can see close enough, but like down way at the end of the picture, not like in the middle, but through there is their tasting room. So they have a tasting room where you come in and can taste everything.
I was telling Josh early on in our conversations that for a long time I had confused El Rey de Matatlan with El Rey Zapoteco, and was shocked when a friend of mine who is a chef and has a great palate was just like raving, "Oh, El Rey Zapoteco, El Rey Zapoteco," and I was just like, really? And it took me a while to realize that I had these two confused, because for anyone who's been to Oaxaca and driven to Matatlan, El Rey de Matatlan is kind of the cheesy tourist stop on the road, and it is in no way related to El Rey Zapoteco. But and there she is.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So they have like a really, I mean, they make very good mezcal, very good mezcal. Everything's done in house, which I love. It was just, it was just a really good opportunity, and I'm gonna do my best to get these guys, a seat at the table in the U.S. where I think they can be, and so to that note, Susan, I put a lot of thought in like running the numbers where they could get on a capacity level, on a case level, in the U.S. And we have a long ways to go, but they have capacity. They're built. I mean, they're built for this. So if I do things the way I should do things, and our team has success with our strategy, we would probably we'll be able to get into the conversation of like the top 10 cases in the U.S. for Espadin.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the end game, the moonshot for El Rey Zapoteco. And we'll see. We're going to use the ace in the hole for them is obviously clearly their agave field. So they we're gonna go very aggressive on the Espadin. We're gonna have a product that's gonna over deliver on price, like it's gonna on quality for the price point that we're gonna offer it at. We're gonna sell it for most retail locations. It's probably gonna sell around like $35 for a 750 milliliter for the Espadin. So at that price point, it's gonna over deliver. And we're just, I'm being very it's a hedged bet. I'm hedging my bet.
Yeah.
I'm going to take very low margins, but then the upside for us is going to be on some of the other wild expressions and stuff. So
I mean, I think, especially as the demand was increasing more and more, we were seeing that there was going to be a gap between supply and demand, particularly when it came to agaves. And I think that for any brand out there that does not, that the Mescalero does not own their own agave fields, it put them in a precarious situation, just given the hugely increased costs of agave in Mexico. Like it's just, when I first started traveling down there, it was 2 to 3 pesos for a kilo, and I think the last I heard in Oaxaca, where the price was almost 19 pesos for a kilo of really good mature agave. And so if you're on the open market, like you're just having to deal with those price fluctuations, in addition to like, can you actually get access to good agave? We have a comment from Edward Taylor on here, who said that on his first trip to Oaxaca in 2010, he went to a mezcal festival after the Guelaguetza, and of everything that he had tasted that evening, he ended up bringing back 2 bottles of El Rey Zapoteco, and just goes to how much he really likes the product. I think it's interesting because I do think, because it's one of the older brands that's been in the market, that because people see that orange building, that there can be a tendency to dismiss the brand, especially seeing it's all over the market in Oaxaca, and not really understanding just what good product it is. And then it's interesting too that they have cremas, because cremas, of course, are completely on in the world of mezcal. And that said, the cremas are really good. I mean, they're very different product. It's like if you're a purist, getting you to like a crema is never going to happen. But it's like I always say, talk to any bartender, and they will secretly admit to kind of liking Baileys, or something along those lines. And and cremas kind of are like that. But it's yeah, it's a lot of work though, to bring any brand into the market. And to do that now. I mean, we're seeing just like the impact of that, of especially how do you do off-premise sales when people don't have the opportunity to try the product first. And if they don't have the opportunity to go to a bar or restaurant where they might be introduced to it, where they can give a taste of it, get a taste of it, then it's hard to do that sell on, oh, and you can go to the corner store and they carry it there. So I think everybody in the category now is struggling with how you actually get people to taste the product.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This is going to be a shameless plug for Mezcalistas, but I, if folks are listening, they should be attentive to this, because I am a big advocate, and I think okay. We are going to be in Mezcalistas newsletter for a number of times. I think six total coming up. We've already done one, so there'll be 5 more. To Susan's point, how do you achieve sales? How do you, in a virtual world right now where no one, people don't even want to maybe see you because they need to be social distancing. So, how do you do that? Well, Mezcalistas, Susan and co. have built a wonderful list of people who, by the way, love mezcal. So you think about, like, from my perspective, or from the perspective of someone who's trying to launch in a time like this. You need to be, mezcal is 2% of agave spirit sales. The rest is tequila. Yeah, and I'm not being disrespectful to Sotol or to Raicilla or anything like that. It's just that would be kind of grouped in the mezcal numbers. So with an eye towards, yes, it's niche. How do you find folks? How do you find find an audience? So Mezcalistas has a captive audience, and Susan has struck up partnerships with Old Town, I want to say Morenos as well, in Chicago.
Morenos, yeah. So, yep, Old Town Tequila, Morenos in Chicago. We're looking to develop other relationships. We have relationships with retailers in New York, but really looking at how we can help, like, people get that last mile of getting products, of getting understanding about it. At this point, bottle sales are crucial for, the existence of the mezcal category in the United States. And that directly relates back to the welfare of any of the families who are producing mezcal. It's one thing to hit a pause button. It's another thing to, like, look at the situation we're in now and kind of realize that we're not going back to anything normal for at least a year. And a year is a long time for families not to be getting any revenue from mezcal sales. So it's, there's a lot of different reasons, to really support brands out there right now. So.
Yeah. So to kind of continue my thought here, you gotta be, if you're thinking about, or you're a brand owner, or you're going to be coming into market, you gotta think creatively, not necessarily out of the box, but creatively and smartly about how you're going to achieve that goal to get sales. And so a group like Mezcalistas can be very, very helpful in getting a direct path to that audience. So, like, we're in Susan's newsletter, and it's in your face, 10% off. If you want it, buy it, and we have a way to do that. And I want to say there was a famous, I don't know who said this, but I want to say it's the guy who created Six Sigma black belt. Like, this whole thing, it's a process about, in business, how to reduce errors in the manufacturing world. And he famously said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And to that point, like, what we have set up with Mezcalistas enables us to see, okay, this is the conversion with this channel. So you got to think about ways, like, how do you achieve that? And you could probably certainly do that with certain, like, Facebook, going after fans of certain groups and profile. Facebook's pretty good at that. There's different ways to achieve that, but what Susan is doing with Mezcalistas, I think, is something brands need to consider more. To the, like, being involved with your newsletter, or I know you've got some other stuff you're working on in the book.
Oh. And I did not pay Josh to say that.
Okay,
just to, yeah.
Susan's been super helpful. Honestly, I'm surprised that, like, this has been such like a open arms kind of community industry. I was a little bit taken aback by that, but Susan's been very welcoming and yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that in terms of the category, something that we have seen at our Mexico in a bottle events is the other brands that are participating there love the fact that they have the opportunity to go and try other product, to go and try, other brands. And, I can't think of any brand that would be successful in the marketplace if they did not have the respect and liking of other product that they were tasting, and that people are proponents of, each other's work and other mezcaleros is, one of the reasons why I love being in this particular category, because there is so much amazing stuff, and that, you can support multiple brands. You can support multiple makers. It's the exciting thing. Nothing tastes like anything else, so it's like, that's just why we're all in it. And
yeah, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not, there are going to be winners and losers, but there's a lot of space for a lot of people to do well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, and so quickly, kind of pivoting back to El Rey Zapoteco, we have currently we have 4 expressions that have landed in the U.S., and those are Espadín, Tovala, Quiche, and Tepestate, and then very shortly we'll have Pechuga, which is used. Turkey breast is used in that one. We'll have Pechuga. That's currently the lineup we're rolling with. We're going to work on getting small bottles to, we need to think creatively, smartly about how in this new environment, like how can you encourage sales? And so one potential roadblock or road bump can be, someone may not want to pay $130 for a bottle, but they will pay $30, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. And it's, I think that a lot of us are coming around to the small bottle idea, and kudos to some of the brands who had been putting the small, bottles into the market, and getting us accustomed to, really excellent product can be found in small bottles. I had never really paid attention. I joke around. I have a local liquor store here, and it is a general liquor store. And they sell an interesting mix of product. And what I've been so shocked about is they have been blowing through mezcal. And I stop in once a week just to kind of, see what's happening. This is in Alameda. And they always have a different selection because they keep on selling, so it's an interesting mix. And then what I happened to notice on the shelf was St. George, which is a distillery here in Alameda. They actually have small gin bottles. And so you're seeing more kind of higher end alcohol spirits, really putting emphasis on those smaller bottles, because it is a way to, to get product into the hand of people at a much more friendly price point without sacrificing on the production end, like paying people less or cutting corners or things like that. Edward had a question for you as to whether or not you're going to continue making the Joven, Reposado, and Añejo versions of the Espadín.
Short answer is they make them right now. I'm just not importing them. So I could be convinced to change that. I could be convinced. I haven't done that yet because in my research, it's my understanding that there is more of a market for Joven versions of expression, less room or opportunity for Reposado and Añejo. Now, I can be completely wrong. I don't know, but that's what that decision was made off of. And also, Edward, they do have a top secret Añejo, like super extra Añejo, and I think they gave me like a drop of it when I was there. But it's probably like 12 years old now, and it tastes like butter. It's just, yeah.
Wow. And Michael Hurley, to the point on the small bottles, he commented that if people actually have the disposable income, they're still going to buy larger bottles. And I think that that is very true. I think right now what we've been seeing in terms of sales in the market is that product priced between like around $60 and $120, kind of like that middle market for mezcal, is the one that's being challenged more in sales, off-premise sales, than the sub $60 or the $120, which collectors are still buying. And in fact, it could be argued that collectors are buying even more of those high-end products because they don't have anywhere else to spend their dollars right now, since they're not going out to dinner, they're not going shopping. So they're putting their money in different.
Yeah, didn't you say, Susan, you guys spoke with Healthy Spirits the other week, and they're really busy, and that's in a well-to-do area, right? So
Yep.
To Michael's point, that makes sense. Like, we have money, we'll spend the money,
but at Healthy Spirits, they're not buying the top shelf stuff. What people have been buying more of are beer, wine, the sub $60, $50 bottles of mezcal when mezcal is selling. I think we are right now at a price sensitive market for the most part. Edward is asking about the new label. He can't remember if we saw the new label.
No, but let me. I'll show the bottles. I'll share my screen and show the bottles.
Yep. And then other questions that people have about this. I don't know if there's anyone in any of the attendees who are in a similar situation, trying to figure out, launching a new brand or bringing brands into the market, or just some of the challenges we're seeing. Are folks in the audience who, are looking to buy more mezcal, or what? So
that's the new bottles. We went with the tall bottles just because we had feedback actually from a conversation I had with Southern Glazers, Southern California division, the craft spirits, and this person told me straight up, the square. You have to forgive me. I should provide some context around this. El Rey Zapoteco, for folks that don't know, in Mexico, they use square bottles, almost like stubby square bottles, which are cool, but they don't work for the U.S. market. Like bartenders, it's hard for a bartender to grab that kind of a bottle up there, or if it's going to be utilized as a well, for example. So that was feedback that directly from a large distributor. That's the reason we went with this bottle, and you can see the label. So we quick little comment about this. If you've ever been to Mexico City, Mexico City has one of the world's best anthropology museums, and there is, you can see the icon, the deity, this is the deity of the Zapotec king. They actually have a statue. So this is like the side profile view of this, but the statue exists in the museum where you can see the full front face. That was actually something we toyed on the idea of like changing the logo, but it was maybe it was a little bit too progressive. So that's what that person, or that icon is, that represents it's actually an important figure in Zapotec culture.
Interesting. Yeah, Michael Hurley, who is importing a Bach Nora, is, also in a similar situation in terms of repping families and trying to figure out how to, as he said, operationalize as much as possible LibDib in getting product out into the market.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. A quick note, I'll offer my free help advice. And there are places, and I'm happy to help with recommendations offline if someone needs. But essentially, and I don't know, is Michael's an importer, you said?
yeah, and he's based in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay. Yeah. Michael, with respect to LibDib, I think the best thing to do is to find warehouse where LibDib warehouse is, so that your product is there, and once an order is placed, it simply gets what's called an outbound transfer, and it's moved from your storage base right over to LibDibs, and then LibDib, it then gets delivered by the warehouse that offers delivery as well, but it's legally going through LibDib. LibDib is the seller. So that way you're cutting out, if you think about it, if you read between the lines, you're not having to ship product. You're only paying for that transportation one time, which is from Mexico to your warehouse. So that would be my recommendation. But.
Yep. What have we got? Any other questions here for Josh? I'm really curious to see how things are going to play out over the next 6 months. On the one hand, there are people out there who know Agave, who are not working in bars currently, and who could be utilized for the boots on the ground for anybody who needs the boots on the ground. It is good to have knowledgeable people going and selling products. I think it is worthwhile to approach different liquor stores in helping them develop content. A lot of liquor stores, obviously they can't open a bottle, they can't taste it. It is very much a conversation that they need to have with customers about why they should buy, you should consider buying this. So it takes time, but how can you help liquor stores with their own marketing? How can you suggest to them of, hey, we'll do a couple of, Instagram live, conversations for your audience, or we'll write up some tasting notes that can go, onto the website, different things like that, so it's like you have to completely rethink how you're selling this product and who the end user is. What are they going to want to know? They're probably going to want to know a lot more about, well, I like things that, are more dry, or I like things that are on the sweeter side, and creating tasting notes that could be more generic. But at the same thing would be like, oh, well, this would be really great for after dinner. And it would go great with apple pie. Things like that. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's like, that's the kind of guidance that people need sometimes when they're buying products, of what things. Eric Zandona had a question of, you showed a picture of a nursery, and can you talk a little bit about the type of agaves that are being cultivated in the nursery?
Yes, I think the ones that you saw, I believe, were Tobola. I know that they have. Obviously, we have Quiche, Tepestate. Another one where I'm considering bringing Ricket is Jabali. But that are cultivated for sure, Tobola. They presently, I want to say, are sourcing their wild expression, their wild agaves from. It's interesting, Susan. I don't fully understand this. I'm going to find out more. But there is a piece of land right across the street from their agave fields, which I believe is owned by the Mexican government. But they have an understanding or an arrangement with Zapoteco that they are able to pull those. They're wild. It's a plot of land which is all wild agaves. So it's like just random stuff, and there's random Tepestates, Quiche, like Karwinski's growing, and all that. So to answer your question, I know for sure Tobola. I don't know what else. What else? It's not the question I need to ask anyways. But yeah, obviously, with an eye towards the future, brands have to go that route. I mean, there's only so many agaves growing in the wild.
Right. And do you happen to know like how, if they're doing a mix of using hijuelos, the genetic clones of the mother plant, and letting some of their agave, go to seed, flower?
Yeah. I am pretty sure, like 95% sure the answer is yes. And so they use. I know this. Can there's more to this than probably I am equipped to speak to. But Zapoteco uses all their agaves are puro capon, so they do cut the stalks off. Now, what they do, I've seen because having been there, I know that they let stalks grow in certain. So I think what that means is the answer to your question is yes. I will ask. I'm going to find out. I know it's. My understanding is that that's important, right, to maintain biodiversity. Yeah.
Yes. And then Edward's commenting that maybe it's time to make some ensemble with the mixed agaves from that field.
Yeah, they have some. That's I've got. It's one of these things, guys. It's like I have to. You got to make a decision. Like, what are you going to start with? The good thing, it's a good problem, but Zapoteco, like Susan mentioned, they have a boatload of cremas, but they also have a lot of agaves, just like different expressions that I can call on as we say we're hitting traction, we're selling. Oh, here's another new line extension or new SKU. So yeah, like I mentioned, Hobbley, they do have an ensemble, and it's one of the things we're actually talking about right now. Like this is pre-COVID, but you talk about like price points fitting in between that $50 to the like $80 range. You got like how do you offer SKUs or line extensions in that price range? Ensembles are a great way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And as I will just say that some of the best mezcal I've ever had has been what they've described as, this was just made from the field, like it was whatever happened to be ripe at the time and we just made it. And traditionally that's how it was done, because it's not as if people were growing, acres and acres of espadín 200, 300, 400 years ago. They were just taking what they found in the field and making from there. But yes, let's see. The question about the PowerPoint, is it available later? The PowerPoint will be included in the recorded link, and I will be sending out the recorded links at the end of this week for this week's talks. And so that the PowerPoint will be embedded in that recording. So yes, and let's see what, from Miguel, who said he recently relocated from the US to Mexico. He's currently in Cuernavaca, and he's been working on starting a brand. He's been debating about the benefits of the producer being certified by the CRM or not. Well, I think in the US market, I'll answer this question, and sorry. I think that in the United States, we have developed an understanding in the market about agave distillates, so that it's not a disadvantage for a brand to come in to the market as a destilado de agave or agave spirit. So from the marketing side of that, you can do that. I think you have to weigh the reasons why you wouldn't want to certify. I don't think that most people who aren't certifying aren't doing it because they're trying to cut corners or do anything like that. Sometimes it comes down to the question of just the production process and the ethical levels that are picked up in the certification process, so that if you're doing a very old school production, sometimes those levels can fall outside what the Mexican government in NOM 199 has defined as the acceptable levels. And the thing about that is in Mexico, they are much lower than what the United States says those levels can be, what Europe says those levels can be. So I think there's a bunch of different, it's just, you have to weigh, like, why you would or would not certify. But El Rey Zapoteco has been in the market for long enough that, of course, they were one of the early people to comply and to work within the DO and the certification process. So that was all taken care of. Josh, that was never a decision you had to make.
No. There was no, there was no do I or don't I. Yeah, but
right.
to Miguel's point, Miguel, I guess that I think in some ways, if you're listening closely to what Susan's saying, the question for you is, who is your customer going to be? Is your customer, are you going to export almost exclusively to the U.S.? If that's the case, you do not, strictly speaking, you don't need to be CRM certified. And as Susan mentioned, there are a number of there's a number of well-known brands out there that produce high quality that are not, they're considered agave distillates, but they're not mezcal. They can't legally be considered mezcal, even though it's mezcal. So it's, I think who your customer is, like, I think that's going to help you make that decision.
Yep. But one thing I want to be clear about is that, I am not anti-regulation of the mezcal industry. I think the CRM operates in a very needed space to have regulation, obviously. I think there are a lot of questions around the DO, how things are defined, that go to the specifics about it. But, in no way do I encourage one way or the other. It's just, the market is elevated enough to recognize that agave distillates occupy a very traditional place within mezcal production. So, and the other thing too is if you're bringing distillates in from areas outside of the DO, then you don't have much of a decision. It's like if you're working within states that aren't part of the DO, then obviously you have to bring things in as a destilado de agave.
Yeah, and one last note, I think it's just like us being responsible to the consumer. It's fine if again, you don't have to go the route of the CRM, but you do need to make sure whoever's producing it has the right testing in place for methanol levels, because, that would be horrible. So
that would be horrible. But yes, and I think it's a very personal relationship that people have regarding agave distillates, because there is no overseeing body. You still have to comply, with US law and things like that. But again, if it is, to skirt costs or things like that to get around some of that stuff, then you're not going about it with the right questions of to certify or not to certify. So, what other questions have we got? Anything? I think for any of you who haven't yet had an opportunity to try El Rey Zapoteco, it is definitely a brand to take a look at. You can order from Old Town Tequila. They can ship just about anywhere in the United States, except officially to Texas, Illinois, Virginia. And I think there are a couple of other states included in that as well. But I highly encourage everybody to give it a try. So, yep. Any other questions from everyone? Great. No, I think that's it. I think that we are ready to wrap it up here. So I want to thank everyone for joining us on today's talk with Josh Veryser of El Rey Zapoteco. And I will be sending out the links for this week's talks at the end of the week. On Wednesday for our Behind the Bar series, we have Christine Wiseman, who is one of the Tales of the Cocktail Bartender of the Year nominees. And she's a total like ball of energy. So hopefully you all can join us again on Wednesday for that talk with Christine, who's based at Broken Shaker. So again, thank you all, and we will be back. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Susan. Take care.
Yep. Have a great day, everybody.